There is a park in Los Angeles that almost nobody visits at 6 in the morning. Not because it is dangerous, because it is empty. Just trees and wet grass and the sound of the city waking up a few blocks away. The kind of place that belongs at that hour to joggers and dog walkers and people who need somewhere quiet to think. On a morning in the spring of 1971, Bruce Lee was running through that park. He ran every morning. Always early. Always alone. It was part of the discipline that structured every hour of his life from before sunrise to well after dark. He came around a bend in the path and almost ran into a man sitting on a bench. The man was in his late 20s. He was wearing military-issue boots and a jacket that had a name patch on it. He was holding a bottle that was mostly empty. His eyes were open, but they were looking at something that was not in the park. Bruce Lee slowed down. He almost kept running. He did not keep running. What happened in the next 60 minutes has never been told publicly. The veteran never gave interviews. He did not want to be a story. He lived quietly, for decades, with what happened that morning in a park in Los Angeles. But he told one person, and that person eventually told someone else. And what they described, what Bruce Lee did and said and chose on a morning when he could have simply kept running, is one of the most extraordinary things anyone has ever reported about the man behind the legend. To understand what Bruce Lee saw when he looked at that man on the bench, you have to understand something about what was happening to Vietnam veterans in 1971. The war was still going on. Men were still being sent. Men were still coming back. And the ones who came back were arriving in an America that did not know what to do with them. These men had been somewhere that words could not describe. They had seen things, done things that could not be explained over dinner or in a therapist's office. They came back and people asked how it was over there. The veterans looked at them and said, fine. Because the gap between what they had lived and what the person asking could understand was so enormous that filling it would take years neither of them had. So they said fine. They went home. And in the quiet of their own houses, in the moments when the ordinary world thinned and the other world came through, the world still going on inside them regardless of geography, they were not fine. The country had no system for this. No language. No way of receiving men broken by history and putting them back together. It just expected them to get on with it. Most tried. Some ended up alone on benches in parks at 6 in the morning with bottles that were mostly empty and eyes that were looking at something nobody else could see. Bruce Lee stopped running. He stood about 10 feet from the bench and looked at the man. He could see the name patch on the jacket. He could see the bottle. He could see the boots, government issue, the kind you can identify immediately if you know what to look for. He could see the posture. Not the posture of a man sleeping off a rough night. The posture of a man who has been sitting in exactly that position for a long time and has no particular intention of moving. Most people in that situation would make a calculation. They would look at the bottle. They would look at the military jacket. They would think, this is someone else's problem. This is a complicated situation. This is not my business. I am in the middle of my run. I am a stranger. I do not know this man. Most people would keep running. Bruce Lee walked over and sat down on the bench. Not next to the man. On the other end. About 3 feet of space between them. He did not say anything. He sat there, breathing from his run, and looked at the same patch of ground that the veteran was looking at. The veteran glanced at him. Bruce Lee did not look back. He just sat. The veteran looked away. They sat in silence for what the person telling this story estimates was about 2 minutes. 2 full minutes of nothing. No words. No movement. Just 2 men on a bench in an empty park at 6 in the morning. Then the veteran said, without looking at Bruce Lee, "You can keep running. I am not going to do anything." Bruce Lee said, "I know." Silence. The veteran said, "Then why are you sitting there?" Bruce Lee said, "Because you looked like someone who has been alone with this for a long time. If you love Bruce Lee stories, subscribe. I post rare stories every day." The veteran looked at him for the first time. He looked at Bruce Lee the way people look at strangers who have just said something that has no business being accurate. With suspicion. And with something underneath the suspicion that was far more fragile. He said, "Who are you?" Bruce Lee told him his name. The veteran did not recognize it. This is important. He did not know who Bruce Lee was. He had not seen the Green Hornet. He had no idea that the man sitting 3 feet away from him on a park bench was, in certain circles, considered one of the most remarkable physical specimens alive. He saw a Chinese man in running clothes who had decided, for no obvious reason, to sit down on his bench. He said, "What do you want?" Bruce Lee said, "Nothing. I just didn't want to keep running past someone who looked like they needed someone to not run past them." The veteran was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that the person telling this story has described as one of the saddest sentences they have ever heard. He said, "Everyone runs past." Bruce Lee did not respond immediately. He let the sentence sit in the air between them. He did not rush to fill it with comfort or reassurance or the well-meaning noise that most people make when someone shows them pain. He let it sit. Then he said, "I know. I have been run past too. Now, I need you to understand something about that sentence." Bruce Lee was a man who had spent his entire adult life being told he was not the right kind of person for the world he was trying to enter. Not American enough for Hollywood. Not traditional enough for the Chinese martial arts community. Not mainstream enough for the studios. He had been run past. Not in the same way. Not with the same wounds. But the experience of being invisible, of walking through a world that looks through you instead of at you, was not foreign to him. He did not make it about himself. He did not say, "I understand exactly how you feel." He said it so the veteran would know he was not speaking from safety, that he was not a tourist in the territory of pain. The veteran heard the weight behind the words, and something in him, something locked tight for a long time, moved, just slightly, like a door that shifts after years closed. Not open, just a creak, a line of light. He said, "I don't know how to be here anymore." Bruce Lee said, "Where is here?" The veteran said, "Alive." Bruce Lee did not panic. He did not reach for his phone to call someone. Though there were no cell phones in 1971, this detail matters because it captures something about the texture of the moment. There was no escape route, no authority to hand the situation to, no protocol to follow. Just 2 men on a bench. And one of them had just said something that the other one understood was not a metaphor. Bruce Lee sat with it. For about 10 seconds, he sat with what had just been said. Then he asked a question. He said, "When did you stop knowing?" The veteran looked at him. Bruce Lee said, "There was a moment, a specific moment, when being here went from something natural, something you did not have to think about, to something that required effort you did not have." "When was that?" The veteran was quiet for a long time. Then he started talking. He talked about the moment, not the war in general, not an abstract description of horror. A specific moment, a specific place, a specific thing that happened that his body had been carrying for 2 years like a stone in his chest that nobody could see. He had never told anyone, not his parents, not his friends. Not the VA doctors who had asked him questions in fluorescent-lit offices and written things on clipboards. Nobody had ever asked him when. They had asked him what. They had asked him how. They asked if he was sleeping, if he was eating, if he had thoughts of hurting himself. Nobody asked when. And that question, the specificity of it, treating his pain not as a category to be managed but as a story with a beginning, broke something open. He talked for almost 40 minutes. Bruce Lee listened. He did not offer solutions. He did not tell the veteran what to do. He did not share his philosophy or his training methods. He listened. The way a person listens when they understand that sometimes the only thing standing between a human being and the decision to stop being here is the knowledge that someone is willing to hear them. When the veteran finished talking, the sun was fully up. The park had started to fill. Joggers, dog walkers, a woman with a stroller, the ordinary machinery of a Los Angeles morning rolling into motion. The veteran looked at the bottle in his hand. He set it on the ground beside the bench. Bruce Lee said, "What would it take to know how to be here again? What is the smallest possible thing?" The veteran thought about it for a long time. He said, "I need to feel like my body belongs to me again. Over there, it did not belong to me. It belonged to whatever was happening around me. I want to feel like it is mine again. Bruce Lee said. I can help with that. The veteran looked at him. Bruce Lee said, not today. Not right now. But I can help with that. If you want. He reached into the pocket of his running jacket. He pulled out a small notebook, the kind he always carried, always covered in notes, always dense with thoughts and observations and ideas that he was constantly working through. He tore a page from the back. He wrote an address on it. His training space. The address where he worked out in the mornings and occasionally taught students. He handed it to the veteran. He said, come whenever you want. If you do not come, that is fine too. But if you want to start taking your body back, that is where I will be. He stood up. He stretched once, briefly, the way a man stretches when he has been sitting after a run. He said, I am glad you are still here. Then he ran. If you love Bruce Lee stories, subscribe. I post rare stories every day. The veteran showed up 3 days later. He did not know what to expect. He almost did not go. He stood outside the address for about 5 minutes before he went in. Bruce Lee was inside, training alone. He looked up when the veteran came in. He said, you came. That was all. No surprise. No performance of warmth. No effort to make the moment feel significant. Just, you came. And then he showed the veteran how to stand. Not a fighting stance. Not a martial arts position. Just how to stand. How to feel the ground under your feet. How to distribute your weight evenly. How to breathe from the center of your body instead of the top. Such simple things. Things that most people do without thinking. Things that the veteran had lost the ability to feel, because for 2 years in a jungle, every physical sensation had been routed through a system of threat assessment that had never fully switched off. The earth under his feet was not the earth under his feet. It was a surface that might contain something, that might give way, that required constant vigilance. Bruce Lee spent an hour teaching him to feel the ground again. Just that. Nothing more. The veteran came back the following week. And the week after. Over the months that followed, months during which Bruce Lee was simultaneously developing Enter the Dragon, dealing with his back injury, and managing the beginning of global recognition, he made time for the veteran. Not a lot of time. An hour here, an hour there, but consistent time. The kind that says, you matter. Not as a project. Not as a good deed. As a person. The veteran eventually got better. Not healed, that is the wrong word for what happens to people who have been where he had been. Not restored to the person he was before. That person was gone. But he found a way to be here. He found work. He got off the bottle. He built a quiet life in a small town in California. Years later, long after Bruce Lee was gone, long after the legend had calcified into poster images and movie marathons and the cultural shorthand of a man frozen at his most iconic, the veteran told the story to one person. His son. He told his son that when he was at his lowest, a stranger sat down on a bench in a park and asked him a question that nobody else had ever thought to ask. He said, most people, when they see someone suffering, want to fix it. They want to solve it. They want to give you the answer and have you feel better and go back to their own lives knowing they helped. He said, this man did not try to fix it. He did not offer me answers. He sat down in the middle of it with me. And just someone sitting down in the middle of it instead of trying to pull me out of it, was the first thing in 2 years that felt real. His son asked, who was he? The veteran said, his name was Bruce Lee. His son had grown up with Enter the Dragon posters on his bedroom wall. He sat very still for a moment. Then he said, Dad, did you know who he was? The veteran said, not that morning. No. His son said, he was the most famous martial artist in the world. The veteran was quiet for a long time. Then he said, I know that now. But that morning he was just a man who did not run past. Here is what this story is really about. Bruce Lee has been made into so many things since his death. A symbol of Asian pride. Pioneer of action cinema. A philosopher. An icon. A legend. All of those things are real. But they are also a replacement, the way legends always replace the person underneath. The person underneath woke up every morning at 4 and ran through empty parks. Knew what it was like to be invisible, to be run past. And on a morning in 1971, when he came around a bend and almost ran past a man on a bench, the person made a choice. Not the legend, the person. He chose to sit down. That choice, photographed by nobody, documented by nobody, known only because a veteran eventually told his son, is in some ways the most Bruce Lee thing Bruce Lee ever did. Not the one-inch punch. Not Jeet Kune Do. Not the films that changed cinema. The choice to sit down on a bench next to a stranger who needed someone to not run past. That is the man. Behind everything else. That is the man.